Our next keynote is basically a rock star in this space, and we're so grateful to her for joining us. Hello, Reshma, and welcome. We're so excited to hear from you today. So excited to hear about your next big endeavor because it's so relevant to our conversation here today. Just to give you context, our whole day today has been talking about the state of women in the workplace right now and how so many of us are feeling frustrated and overwhelmed by the dynamics of COVID life added into the things we were dealing with in the workplace on top of everything else. So please tell us about you and about what you were doing and about the Marshall Plans for Mom.
Oh,
The
thank
Marshall
you.
Plan for Moms, excuse me.
Well, I'm a 7-year-old and a geriatric dog. Um, I pretty much feel like I live in this corner of my bedroom on Zoom. I'm the founder and was the CEO of Girls Who Code for the past 9 years of my life. And then in 2020, my everything changed. I found myself beginning the year with a Super Bowl ad. Girls Who Code was at the top of the world. I was going to teach more girls than I ever had before. I was having my second child, and I was so looking forward to spending time with him and taking my paternity leave. And then the world came crashing down, and COVID-19 hit. And I found myself having to go back to work 3 weeks later, homeschooling my 6-year-old, taking care of my newborn, and saving Girls Who Code from being shut down. And my entire leadership team were all working moms. And so much of what we were saying to ourselves was just hold on until the schools open. Because when the schools open, we can then solve that problem, do that KPI, raise that dollar. And then the schools didn't open. And they came up with this thing called hybrid learning, where you got to log on your kid at 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock, and 11 o'clock. And you then started to see millions of women get pushed out of the workforce. And now, 2 years later, women are still in crisis. There's still millions of us missing from the workforce. That doesn't include the amount of us that have downshifted our careers. Our mental health is shattered. The CDC said that the subgroup that has the most amount of anxiety and depression other than 18-year-olds is us, moms, and moms don't break. And it's been a big eye opener that workplaces have never been designed for us. And so that instead of returning back to normal, let's build something new. And that's what we're doing at the Marshall Plan for Moms. We are basically pushing for workplace policies that are going to actually give us a shot at equality. We are organizing moms, so we don't feel like decisions that are being made on our behalf and that we're out of control out of our lives. And we're just, still pushing for public sector change, though I'm less confident that Congress is going to grow a heart.
Yeah. Uh, I certainly hope they do. And just to be really candid and vulnerable, talking about moms don't break, I will confess that I basically had a breakdown this morning in front of my two kids because we couldn't find my son's favorite stuffed animal. We had to get out the door and,
No,
anyway,
I
so
had the same
we're
thing.
all living it.
I made my 7-year-old cry this morning because I was rushing. My husband's traveling. And so it's like me, it's the baby, it's like everything. It's like I'm working. And it's like, I'm like, come on, come on, come on. We got to go. I don't want to be late again. Like, I don't want to get the late pass. And then you have these emotional breakdowns. And then you're like apologizing to your kid. And then you feel like shit. And you go back to your day and you're just replaying the morning over and over and over again. And I think this is the reality for so many moms in this
Yeah,
moment.
for sure. Um, so I want to I want to learn more about you because like, I will sit there with my friends and say this doesn't work and this isn't working in our country and our systems. This doesn't work for women. I go on and on about how our country doesn't prioritize caregiving or the next generation. But you actually make these observations and then go do something about it. You've started two groundbreaking organizations and you've run for office. Can you talk about how you find the courage and the motivation, the energy to do these things?
I was on a panel actually with Indra Nooyi yesterday, and she really described herself well. And because someone was saying, well, what does it take to be a CEO? And she said, I don't recommend it because I don't sleep. I don't rest. My mind is always on. And that's kind of how I feel, meaning like I'm up at night thinking about about how to convince a CEO to start subsidizing childcare. Like I'm up at night angry, that the school day is 8 to 3 and the work day is 9 to 5. I'm up at
Yes.
night just trying to understand these complex problems and figure out what I can do about them. I've always been this way. And listen, I mean, I think it comes to, I think it's not, people always like, how do you do this? I'm like, well, I don't, that the only way that I know how to like survive and function, and I need to figure out how to articulate this better, is to do something. Or else I would just be angry, screaming at the television all day long. And I don't think anybody would be able to live with me. The fact that I'm able to like make some of this into action allows me some sanity.
Well, I'm so glad it does because we're so grateful for the work that you're doing. Your new book talks a lot about imposter syndrome, and this comes up a lot. So I'm going to break this. I want to go slowly here. Tell us what what does imposter syndrome mean, and what do you think we all need to do to address it?
I hate that word. And it's so funny because this was a big reveal for me too over the post of this pandemic. I spent the past 10 years kind of telling girls to barnstorm the corner office and be brave, not perfect, and lean in real hard and girl boss their way to the top. And I was wrong. I learned the hard way during the pandemic, having these two little babies and running this organization, that it nearly broke me. And I learned the hard way that having it all is just a euphemism for doing it all. And it's not about color coding your calendar. It's not about finding a mentor or a sponsor. It's not about delegating. We have to stop trying to fix the woman and fix the structure. And so this whole idea of imposter syndrome comes out of the fact that everything that we have fed women is about fixing them rather than putting the light on what's broken in the structure. So you graduate at the top of your class, you get to work, you have kids, you're exhausted, it's just too much, you're not able to kind of raise your hand the way that the guys are, and you think that you have imposter syndrome. When really the problem is you don't got childcare. And so we have again, and you know, I, I don't know how this exactly happened. I want to go back and really think about where, and I think because so much of feminism was about getting equality in the workplace, we we're fighting for our right to work. And we kind of made this implicit deal with the devil that to do so, we were going to have to hide the fact that we were mothers. We were not going to put pictures of them on our desk. We were not going to say, I'm sorry, I have to take them to the doctor's appointment. We were going to literally hide that piece of our identity so you would allow us to participate in this workplace. And everything that, men don't read books like Lean In. They don't read books like Confidence Code. They don't practice their
They don't
power
have to.
poses. They don't
Right.
have to. No, but I don't even know it's because they don't have to, because they have confidence. They haven't been socialized that way.
Well, that's it. They haven't had the experience of being
Right.
left behind or being left out.
Right. But the thing is that we've been left out, not because, what's crazy? And I'm reminded of this. I was just reminded of this again a couple days ago. I'm like, that we we are women are 72% of high school valedictorians. We are 57% of college graduates. We are the majority of those getting their PhD, the majority of those getting their master's. And this is not the past 2 or 3 years. This has been like this for 30 years. But if
Right.
we look 30 years ago to now, and we look at the numbers of women in CEO positions, the number of women reaching venture, basically getting their businesses funded, the women in the middle that are becoming managers, that number has not changed, nor is it commensurate with our performance, with our ability. So that's why words like imposter syndrome piss me off, because what are you an imposter of? You're already the best by every single measure. So the real question I want you to ask yourself is, what are you reading? What are you consuming to make you feel like you don't belong? And what is really at the root of that? So for me, when I did that analysis, I'm like, I'm exhausted because I have basically a new babysitter every 4 months, because the entire structure is a mess for them and for me, right? And so the system is broken. I'm exhausted because my husband didn't have paid leave and I did. And so that changed the entire equation in our marriage and in our relationship, where now I do all the cognitive labor and all of the domestic work while I am, and we are in couples counseling fighting about the same thing for now 9 years, right? And had he taken paid leave and we had actually negotiated that in the beginning, things would be radically different. And now I'm made to feel like I didn't raise him right, that it's my shame, and that it's not the structure. And so part of my big aha is we're focused on all the wrong things. And I, as a leader, have been focusing people on all the wrong things, right? And that what we really need to fight for are these structural changes. And until we get the structural changes, we're not going to get the rest. So we've lost the fight in Washington. Let's just not even like pretend. Like it's not passing. It's just not.
Right, because to your point, there's also not women in government, right? They're not women in the
Not women in
C-suite,
government.
there's not women in
We're
government.
too exhausted to barnstorm, Manchin's office, and we're being taken advantage of. And so they know it. They know that. And if you think about what I would love someone to do an investigative report on is the decision to close schools. I find this so fascinating. Policymakers knew in March, April, May who was doing the homeschooling, because in the United States, we do these time and use surveys. So they knew it was us, but they still made a decision. Now, they didn't make this decision in the UK, in France, in Germany, even in Canada, made very different decisions because of the impact that it was going to make on women. We went ahead and did it. Didn't even ask us, and didn't even worry about the repercussions that they were going to pay in the ballot box years later. So, I mean, that is just a wake-up call, right? About how insignificant they think about us. And so, okay, I'm going to come back to that in 4 years. I see you. But now let's focus on workplaces, because this is where we have leverage. There's 11 million open jobs right now, and they need butts in seats. They need our butts in those seats. And so the opportunity is how can we then in this moment demand for the structure to change? And so that is what I'm laser focused on, is basically using that leverage and tying it to, again, it makes economic sense. Don't do it because it's because you think it's, because you want to get written about in Fortune or Forbes, or because you want, to not get, iced on Twitter. Just do it because it makes sense from a capitalism perspective. And I think when you really take that perspective on it and you start pulling the data as we've been doing, the cost of attrition is actually higher than if you started paying for people's childcare. And so we have to start making these kinds of arguments. But we also have to, and the thing that I'm really thinking about, because I've probably talked to like 5,000 women over the past 3 weeks. And when I do this, I can't see anybody right now, but everybody's quiet. And they're looking at me and I'm thinking, you think I'm crazy, don't you? Like, you think that this is like Reshma's fantasy world that I'm talking about. And I don't think that that's entirely true, but I think that there's a piece of us, and I get it, because I would be that woman in the audience that's like, well, how do I know you're right, but I'm so used to I'm so used to just making do, so used to breastfeeding in closets, that really, can I ask? Because I don't even ask about paid leave policies when I'm interviewing for a job. So how do we shift working women's mind shift? And I think a good comp of how this happens is IVF. As I write about in my book, 5 years ago, like 3 companies were paying for egg freezing. Literally, nobody was doing it. But then what happened is every time someone went into an interview, men and women, they'd say, what are your fertility benefits? And they kept getting, companies, HR kept getting asked this question. And they realized, and the tech companies realized it first, wow, if we're going to actually get these young women that we need, 57% of college graduates, the vast majority of, we need that talent, maybe we should start covering IVF. And it went from like 5 people doing it to everybody in like 3 years. The same thing can happen with childcare. It's not a pipe dream. If we start, and paid leave, if we start asking for it, not just us, everybody, even if you don't have a child, and men, it can change. Sorry, I'm gonna be quiet now. But you hear what I'm saying? Like, this is like the opportunity, and I just cannot keep stressing it enough that like we can do this.
Please don't be quiet. We're all so enthusiastic. You can see it in the chat. We're all so grateful and enthusiastic to you for raising these issues that we feel so ground down by. So I'm going to go off script a little bit because I feel like it's natural to ask, you're saying that the change can come through companies. How can we, as corporate employees, help propel that change? What can we do? What do you think we need to be doing?
Yeah, so I think we need to all advocate for one thing for ourselves. And I think we need to, so whether that is for you, flexibility, whether that's remote working, whether that's paid leave, I think that we have to start advocating for ourselves. And then in the organizations that we are a part of, in our women ERG groups, in our parenting groups at work, we need to start having a radically different conversation. We need to start talking about the structure. We need to start auditing our corporate policies. We need to, all the programming that you typically do for Women's History Month, throw it in the garbage. Anything that feels like I'm inviting someone to give you a skill set so I can fix us is a deviation from what we need to be focused on. The way we get to equality is not by making ourselves even more, performing even more, getting another skill. It is about fixing policies in the workplace that basically prevent us from reaching equality. So we got to radically shift the narrative in the conversation.
I'm glad you said radical because this is radical.
It is radical.
And one of the things I want to kind of turn to is what's on, I think, a lot of people's minds today, which is that, frankly, commuting helped alleviate, with the kids back in school, not having our commute has helped alleviate some of the challenges, right? Especially the one that you mentioned at the beginning with the difference between the school schedule and the work schedule, right? And now we're being asked either to go back to the workplace or to choose to be remote while others go back.
Yeah.
And that's causing a moment of tension and question. I think also, just speaking for people in New York yesterday, there was this attack on the subway.
Yep.
So now we're like at the precipice of going back to work and we're feeling uneasy about
kids are basically sheltering in place because there's a crazy person running around in New York City. Yeah, I got it. Mine too.
Yeah.
So this is the thing. So yes. So here's the thing. I think we can't return back to the old system. It wasn't working. It wasn't working for us. Wasn't working for women of color who were facing microaggressions in the workplace. It wasn't working for non-binary. It wasn't working for anybody. It was working for white men who had stay-at-home wives at home. That's it. And so, but we have to say to ourselves, it's not just like, let us all work remotely, because we don't want to create a two-tier system. Because what's often happening right now is all the young men are in the office 5 days a week, talking about the water cooler, sitting there walking into the CEO's office, and we're at home doing laundry in between Zoom. Real talk, right? So I think that what it means is that we have to demand that so if you're my employer and you're offering me flexibility remote, I also want you to show me what policies you're putting in place to ensure that I am not penalized for taking that benefit. Because what we have to remember is mothers are not a protected class in the workplace. So, and that is also something that we have to change. So that, like, again, you can be, discriminated against for caretaking, technically, right? And so we have to make sure we focus the conversation on design and move away from, are we going into the office or not going into the office? But then we're not going into the office. How is this going to work? And, how are we designing it so that we have policies in place? And here's the thing. I think that I do think that everybody like, for a lot of people, like, nobody comes into the office on Fridays. Like, I think what moms want, everybody wants. And so we have to also then form our allies in the workplace that want the same things that we want, and really push the conversation again around design and implementation. How is this going to work? And also just accept that, like, this next year is about experimentation. We should experiment lots of different things. Try lots of different things about what works. Maybe it is about moving the workday to 9 to 3 and everybody leaves at 3. You know what I mean? And you can pick up your kids from school or whatever it is. But I think that we have to basically really incentivize and and ask for experimentation because we don't know what's going to work. We do know what we were doing pre-pandemic was not working.
So our theme today here is lifting as we climb, and you obviously live these values. And one of the things we're talking a lot about is how, if I don't feel stable or if I don't feel secure in my position, how can I advocate for others? Can you talk a little bit about how to address that?
You're right. I wish we could all go on a national vacation for the next 2 months.
Can we?
I'm exhausted too. I'm doing Yale's commencement speech this year, and this is what I've been really struggling with because, not just for us, but for young people. For basically most of my career, I was telling girls, go change the world, climate, COVID, and cancer, go. But they're exhausted. The suicide rates are higher for girls than they've ever been, higher for mothers than they've ever been. For moms, our alcohol addiction, Adderall addiction. I don't know about you, I have a lot of friends that are in it right now, literally in it. And it's a lot. It's a lot so we have got to heal ourselves and we have to, and this is why I talk about my book, Pay Up, which I hope everybody buys and everybody gets and everybody reads, is like, what do we do to empower ourselves? And, for me, I needed to create tangible boundaries. So even in the way that I live, I'm not the same CEO I was when I started Girls Who Code. I sleep 8 hours a day. I got a Whoop. And I basically, my day is about how much did I get 8 hours? I play tennis 3 times, 4 times a week. I go on girls' nights. I go on dinner with my husband. Like I at 6 o'clock, don't call me. You know what I mean? And I'm not gonna call you. And I'm really going to look for joy. And I'm not going to feel guilty about joy because for me, the hustle culture has to die. And so, yeah.
But I see a question coming from the audience that I think is a really important and relevant one, which is, yeah, it's got to die, and it's so it's oppressive. But it hasn't died, and so when you were younger, Reshma, the reason you are who you are today, it was the hustle, right? So what do we say to younger? What are you going to say at this
I
commencement
don't know
speech,
if it
right?
was the hustle. I actually think I got in my way. I'll tell you something. I'm building the Marshall Plan for Moms in a different way in the middle of the pandemic in this life. And I've actually accomplished more for Marshall Plan for Moms than I did for Girls Who Code in the same period of time. And I'm doing it differently. So I don't know if that's true. I think everything we've been told that, right? Because this is the thing we've been told. You got to work harder. You got to be better. You got to be the best. The only way that you're going to get to the top is by being the best. And I'm sorry, like I have basically been in every single powerful room of every single man you can imagine. They're not smart. They're not as competent as we are. They're not as qualified, as prepared. They don't live the hustle culture. They sleep till 11. They do. So it's different to say, let's model our behavior after men and be like them. Well, if you want to do that, go to sleep, go on vacation, turn it off. But because people couldn't explain why we weren't getting to equality, they had to basically tell you that you were the problem. You're just not trying hard enough. You're not working hard enough. You're not taking enough classes. Because there was no other way to explain sexism than to make it about you. And we all bought into that. So I don't think you have to live and work that way. And I think if you live and work that way, we're not going to get to equality. We're getting to extreme burnout. And so not only
We've
are we
seen
not
that,
getting
yes.
to equality, we're getting to higher suicide rates. So we got to just literally call break. You know what I mean? Regroup as feminists and and I'm not saying that I have some answers and Pay Up and I want people to read it and tell me what you think. I'm not saying that I have the whole play, but what I am saying to you is that we got to rewrite the playbook. We can't go back, just like we can't go back to offices that were broken. We can't go back to a feminist philosophy that was broken. And racism.
I love it. And
yes. All
yeah.
of that structural and I want to say one point on this point because I think this is important. When I built Girls Who Code, I went to refugee camps. I'm the daughter of refugees. I went to the poorest communities, and I said, if I can teach her to code, I can teach anybody. When we built workplaces, we built them for the most privileged, not the most vulnerable. And we got to build workplaces for single mothers that are women of color that face every single form of oppression and structural challenge. And if we can make them work for her, we can make them work for anybody.
Love it. I'm going to ask another kind of controversial question that has been come up in the chat, which is, and you talked about this, like mothers are not a protected class in the workforce. And there are a lot of people who are not mothers in the workforce, not parents in the workforce, right? Who say, well, why should the rules be different? What do you say to those people?
Well, I get this question a lot, and I think, why should the rules be different for moms? Because moms are discriminated against in the workforce. When we talk about the pay gap is not about gender, nor is it even about care. It's about mothers. And this is what's so frustrating. I mean, if you look at like the recent articles, childless women are making more than men in 22 states. The largest pay gap is actually not between men and women. It's between childless women and mothers. So to even call it a gender pay gap is actually false. It's a motherhood gap. And I don't know about you, but like, I think this goes back to humility, empathy. I want to live in a country that always protects its most vulnerable, whether that is trans girls, whether that is non-binary, whether that's Black women. And the reality is that moms are our most vulnerable right now. And so all of us, whether you are a mom or not a mom, should be like, yes, I want to live in a world, in a society, in a country where we protect our most vulnerable. It can't just be about what's in it for you. Because if we operate that way, we don't, I mean, even if we think about this conversation that we've had around racism and around finally having a conversation about white privilege and finally maybe having a conversation about unearned white privilege, right? It's like, yes, you have gotten something that you didn't earn. And so you have to give something up. And that is the same kind of conversation, quite frankly, that we have to have around motherhood. And like, because to me, what I say to people is it's the same reason why I continue to fight for reproductive rights, even though I've probably passed the age of needing that right, because you always should protect your choice. And the reality is like we have the lowest birth rate in this country because it is too expensive, too hard to have children. And young women look at us and then we say, yeah, no, thank you. And what I say is that you are my sisters in this fight because don't let them choose for you. You choose.
Well, really, really well said, Reshma. So I'm going to give you these last few minutes here to again just sort of reiterate. I think you have gained a lot of following here, and a lot of people are really inspired by what you're saying. So what can we do? How do we continue to operate? How do we working mothers survive in this framework? And then who are not working mothers, or even if you are, how do we advocate for ourselves and each other to make the change?
Well, join our community at Marshall Plan for Moms. Again, join with this amazing organization, Galvanize Fairygodboss. We have incredible organizations of women that are been doing this work and doing this work for a long time that often sit adjacent to one another. Everyone get incredibly familiar with what's happening out there and join and recognize that, listen, we can go from crisis to power. That doesn't mean I'm asking you to march to Washington right now or protest. But I'm asking you to do is just join us in looking at this from a different lens. Join us in feeling that you do have power in this moment. That we have to stop letting things be done to us and happen to us. And that could just mean saying, you know what, I'm going to advocate for one thing for myself. I had a woman DM me the other day that after reading my book, she was like, went back and she had gotten, some time off to take care of her kid. And she was like, I never really realized how that exactly happened. She went back to her HR and she said, can you walk me through how I got this benefit? And they said, oh, we took it out of your bonus. And she said, huh. So part of it is like asking those questions. no, you know what I mean? Really, like this idea of like knowing your rights and knowing and people knowing that you see them. And that's going to bring about a lot of change because I will say to you, they are terrified of us. This collective us of mothers and what that emotionally means for people, and so we have more power than we think. It's just that, again, we've been socialized to just do everything for the sake of the good. And now it's time to pay up.
I love it. Reshma, thank you so much for joining us here today. We're all feeling like the burning platform underneath us.